As far as women's basketball goes, right now it's never been more popular than what it is currently. People are going to games, and I think women's basketball is at an all-time high. People watch hockey for the fights. People watch NASCAR for the crashes. People love football for the hits. And I think in women's basketball, people want to watch people get knocked down and get back up. Incoming freshmen may be making more money than what an incoming senior is making in that program. People are choosing school for money as opposed to fit. And so there are people that I have not recruited because of what's on their social media page. At the next level, they're looking for reasons not to take you. Don't give them one. I think that if you truly love the sport, I don't think the sport is what's going to burn you out. I think it's everything around you that could burn you out.
Whether you are a fan of college women's basketball, an aspiring college basketball coach, or athlete, you are in the right place. Welcome to episode number 9 of Premier Insights Podcast. My name is Raphael Levon Price, and this week we're honored to welcome a college basketball coach whose tenure wasn't just measured in games and wins, but in resilience, leadership, and legacy. A 1993 Oakland University alumnus and former standout baseball star, Coach Jeff Tungate returned to his alma mater and transformed its women's basketball program. Over 11 seasons, he led the team to its third most wins ever, orchestrated memorable victories against ranked opponents, and instilled a defensive grit that ranked nationally, all while battling back issues that ultimately led to his retirement. More than a visionary coach for over 30 years, including 21 at the NCAA Division I level, he's a mentor who shaped champions on and off the court. We are thrilled to have him here today. Tune in to learn 10 common mistakes college athletes should avoid, especially when choosing sports programs and engaging in the well-known name, image, and likeness deals. Welcome to the show, Coach Tungate.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It is awesome to have you here. What a great honor and privilege. And before we go for a slam dunk with our main topic, we need to stretch and loosen up a little bit. So we want you to tell us a little bit about your perspective on the evolution of college basketball and some of the issues and challenges affecting the game for today's athletes and coaches.
You know, I think as far as women's basketball goes, right now it's never been more popular than what it is currently. You know, I think a lot of that obviously has to do with the Caitlin Clark effect, but, people are tuning in, people are watching games, people are going to games, and I think women's basketball is at an all-time high. I think some of the challenges that may keep it from going where it needs to go, and I can say this now that I'm not coaching anymore, but officiating, I think, is a really big key, and not because of the officials. There's outstanding officials in women's basketball, but I think the way the rules are written today make it really, really difficult for officials, and a lot of the games turn into free throw contests that people don't want to watch. I've always said that people watch hockey for the fights. People watch NASCAR for the crashes. People love football for the hits. And I think in women's basketball, people want to watch people get knocked down and get back up. I think that's a great life lesson. I think it's what people like to see. And I think there's a real challenge in women's basketball right now where, they have, to me, one of the stupidest rules that there is. It's called the hot stove touch. You can touch an offensive player for the length that you'd have your hand on a hot stove. Well, what if I'm tougher than you and I can hold my hand on a stove longer than you? And if you do 2 touches, it's a foul. If you touch with one hand, then the other hand's a foul. And so the referees in the old days used to be advantage, disadvantage. When there's advantage gained, you call it. if there's no advantage gained, it wasn't called. And teams got to play, and there's a physicality to the game. And I think from a fan standpoint, I just hope that because of the way the rules are written, that doesn't affect the popularity and the impact of the game. I just think there's something in our society where we love to see a person get knocked down and get back up. And, and now you got the flagrant fouls. And if they foul them too hard, it's a flagrant 1, a flagrant 2, and all that kind of stuff. And, again, if there's an advantage, call it. If not, let it go. So I think that's a real challenge to the game. I think with NIL right now, I know we're going to talk about this later.
Before you go into NIL, I was going to say for a moment there, I thought you were talking about the NFL and the rules that they have to protect the quarterback.
Yeah. And now I understand those rules though, because that's, people want to go see Jared Goff. You want to make sure Jared Goff stays healthy, and you want to protect the people you want to go see, obviously. But yeah, even those are taken a little bit to the extreme now as well. So there is some similarities there. There's no doubt about that. But I think with an NIL, it creates a challenge in the locker room, because now incoming freshmen may be making more money than what a incoming senior is making in that program. And I think that can create some real issues in the locker room, to where now it's more of a pro model, that you might sign a free agent that's done nothing for an NBA team or a WNBA team, but is going to sign for more money than someone that's been an all-star on that same team. And so I think, the pro model, they're a little more ready for that type of environment. For an 18 to 22-year-old kid to say, I'm making whatever. Now someone that's never played a minute in this program is going to make more than me. And then when they don't produce, I think that could be some problems. Or throughout the season, if, my numbers are better than their numbers, why am I not making more money? So I think it presents a lot of new challenges to coaches nowadays to have to manage a locker room. Obviously culture is always a huge thing in any sport, in any business, in any organization. But I think now it's even harder for coaches to create that culture in the locker room because of what's going on with the NIL. So I think those are some of the few challenges that I see. But again, the game itself, it's an all-time high of popularity, and more people are tuning in, more fans that have never watched women's basketball, and fallen in love with women's basketball. So I'm excited for the growth of the game, and I'm excited to see what the next 5 to 10 years bring.
Very well said, Coach Tungate. And you have touched on a few of the items that really are hot button issues that tend to polarize coaches and athletes. And they can be very, very salient things that get into, as you mentioned, issues of culture, but also the implications of regulation. How do we regulate college sports at the NCAA Division I level in particular? But now let's shift gears. Let's do a pivot just a little bit and talk about what are 10 common mistakes that college athletes should avoid, especially when choosing a sports program and engaging in name, image, and likeness deals.
The biggest mistake I think people make is for the reason why they choose a school. I think now people are choosing school for money as opposed to fit. And then after a year, they're not happy. Then they're going to the next school, and they're always looking for the next thing. I think there's a important life lesson that sticking it out, battling through adversity, not running when the first negative thing hits you is important.
When you get fouled and you don't like to be touched.
Exactly. To get back up again. But I think that, it's so, for example, and I'm not talking about the high majors where you're talking millions of dollars that people are getting paid, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but at a mid-major basketball program, let's say there's a women's basketball player out there that's going to make $30,000. And that's great. You're going to get $30,000. That's going to help on top of what you're getting for your scholarship. That's going to pay for travel home. It may get you a used car that you can drive, or a lease on a car or something. It's going to take care of you to a certain degree. But if the school you're going to can't give you a 4-year education that's going to set you up for life over a 40-year time span, if I go to school A and make $30,000 a year with NIL money. So that gives me $120,000. If I stay, that's a whole nother story. But if I stay over 4 years and I get $120,000 from that deal, or if I go to school B that's known for that degree program that I want to pursue, and it's going to give me a starting salary that's $5,000 more per year than school A. Well, over 40 years, I'm making $200,000 compared to the $120,000 they're giving me immediately. And so I think that there's so much more. And again, I know everyone's got unique circumstances. Like there's family situations, family dynamics. That $30,000 may be something that, maybe their family's going through a rough time and they need that to make the next house payment or to help put food on the table. I know there's exceptions and examples and things like that. But I also think that when people look for a school, they have to find a school that's going to fit what they want to do for the rest of their life. And I think they're going in it. And the first question, I had this happen at Oakland on a visit one time. One of the first questions they ask is, how much are you going to pay? Not what role do you see me playing? How am I going to fit in with my teammates? How am I going to fit in on campus? What type of degree that I want to go into? How's it going to prepare me for life? And I think people are looking at all the wrong reasons for why they should go into school. So I think that's the first thing. That's a big mistake.
Yeah, and I was going to say that really brings into question how these athletes are able to juggle the responsibility of being an athlete at a high level, which is really akin to being a full-time employee, where you're putting in 40 plus hours a week in your sport, the training table, and so on and so forth, studying the playbook and everything. It really is a full-time job, which is why many would argue their pay is justifiable. But how do they balance that and pursue a rigorous academic program that could lead to one of those higher paying gigs that you just elucidated?
Well, I think, that would go to another mistake that people make when it comes to college recruiting in general is they're not prepared for time management. And I think that's a big thing. I remember I had some players sometimes be like, I don't have any time. I don't have any free time. I'm always doing something. How am I going to? And so I would take out a calendar and we would go through every day and I would highlight, okay, when do you wake up? They would tell me, I said, well, let's add another hour to that. Let's just sleep in an hour later, whatever. What time do you go to bed? What time do you eat? And we would map everything out. And over the course of a 24-hour day with proper sleep, proper nutrition, they were amazed at how much time they actually had. And so I think a lot of it with time management is you seem busy until you really look at your calendar and realize, you know what, I'm really not that busy. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they're not putting a lot of time, a lot of effort, but at the end of the day, it's a game. And so what they're doing and putting their time into is something they have a true passion for, something they enjoy, and something they can get away from those things with the classroom and academics and things that maybe they don't enjoy quite as much. And so I think that time management is a huge thing to prepare people to be able to balance that. And I think they come, in a lot of cases, they'll prepare for that. Because you think about in the high school, you start class at 7:20, you're done at 2:20, you go straight to practice at 2:45, you're done exactly at 4:45. You go home, you eat dinner, you do your homework, you hang out with your friends, you go to bed, repeat the next day. Where college, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you may have a class at 8 o'clock. On a Tuesday, Thursday, you may have class at 10 o'clock. A practice in college may go from 1 to 3. It may go from 1 to 4. You may have weights after. You may have weights in the morning. And so I think, especially with youth today, they like to be organized, knowing what's coming next.
Yes.
And I think in a college environment, that's very difficult to do sometimes.
Sure.
And I think that brings a lot of anxiety and stress to students nowadays because they don't know how to pivot to the unknown, to where, in today's world, you can't call someone and say, hey, in 2 hours, we're going to practice. They'd be, well, wait a minute. I didn't know about it. Why didn't you tell me yesterday that we're practicing? And so I think creating a structure, but yet knowing that there has to be some flexibility at the college is a big part of teaching them how to deal with the lessons for life.
Very well said, Coach Tungate. And then another item that we have on the list is this whole idea of failing to be proactive in contacting coaches. Waiting for recruiters to reach out can stall the recruiting process. Now, is that true?
I disagree with that to some extent. Depends on the sport. But I know in basketball, for example, if you're good enough, they'll find you. I mean, that's, college coaches, especially at the Division I level, are paid very well to recruit. And I know with my staff, they needed to know who was available in Michigan, who was out there in Michigan, and if they were good enough in Michigan. And the one thing that I never liked, and when I was assistant, I know when I worked for Coach Campy, we needed to know our recruiting area, and we didn't know who was there. And so just from contacts and word of mouth, if you're good enough, people will, they'll find you. Now there's exceptions to that. And I know from it doesn't hurt to be proactive, but it's how you're proactive that's important. It's amazing how many videos I would get sent and that player never missed a shot. It was because they're sending highlight films of them shooting the basketball, never a miss. And I want to see, and those highlight films are important to where at least it'll pique my interest to be, okay, form looks good. They look like they got good size, athleticism, whatever it is that I'm looking at. And then at that point, I want to see a game. I want to see, okay, what happens how do they respond when that shot didn't go in? What happens when that teammate got fouled hard, got knocked down? Did you run over and help them up, or did you ignore them? What happens when you walk off the court after, during a timeout? Do you look at the coach in the eye? Do you pay attention during the timeout? What happens when do your teammates, when you make a shot, do they high five you or do they ignore you? Does that mean there's a disconnect with your teammates? I mean, there's so many things you can see in a game that you're not going to see in a highlight film.
Yes.
And so I think when people are proactive, if they do reach out to a college coach, I think it's what they put in that highlight film that's so important. If you're a shooter, great, put in a bunch of shots you're making, but show some other things that you're capable of doing. Show how you defend, how you have a good IQ for the game, how you're a good teammate. I think those are some things that coaches want to see, and it doesn't have to be long. The highlight film can be a real quick 2 to 3 minute thing that just catches their interest because, I would get literally close to, I don't know the exact number, but a lot of films sent to me every week. And I would give some to my staff, but but there's no way that you have time to sit down and watch 50 players play an entire game for that week. But if those 50 players send a 2 or 3 minute, between me and my staff, we're going to watch it and then follow up on the ones that piqued our interest. So they got to do it in a way that's going to pique a coach's interest and say, you know what, I need to find out more. It's not going to be, the highlight film's not going to sell the coach on that player, but it's just got to be enough to say, I need to call their high school coach or their AAU coach or go watch them in person or get a full game film, just enough to let them know more. So, I kind of got mixed feelings on that. I think it doesn't hurt to be proactive, but at the end of the day, if you're good enough, they'll find you.
Beautiful. And you just answered a question that I was going to ask you. What's a quick way to turn off a recruiter or a coach? And basically, I would say, you can give them 100-minute film to watch with you just making all your free throws or making all these highlight reel plays, right? And you're not showing them the accurate picture of the full scope of your character and your repertoire of skills and how you relate to the other players, your game, sportsmanlike conduct, and so forth. So very well. Now let's look at talking about the issue of neglecting academics, because as an educator, I know that a lot of times, as you speak about the disconnect with players among themselves, there can be a disconnect sometimes with players and the educators that are serving them on the other side. And so could you maybe talk to that a little bit about how essential it is for players to be smart and tough, to be disciplined with their school, their learning, going to class, being on time, showing up, being academically honest, writing their own papers, preparing for tests and so forth, and just having a very strong academic pedigree as they move to the next level. Can you talk to that a little bit, Coach Tungate?
Yeah, obviously that's one major mistake it's people make, and sometimes they don't take their academics seriously. And that's a huge, huge mistake in what people do, because at the end of the day, it's your degree that's going to get you where you want to go. You want to pursue your dreams. I never want to take away a dream of a player wanting to play professionally, and I'll do everything I could to help them play professionally, whether that's overseas or at the next level. And I have players today that are contacting me about opportunities overseas and that I coached in the past and things. I'll help them any way I can. But at some point, that ball's going to stop bouncing. And, at one point, I used to be able to play. I could never defend, but I could shoot. And those days stopped. I can't play anymore. I haven't been able to play for years, but I can still use my degree. And I think so many times that people forget that at some point, you hope it's 10, 15, 20 years from now, but at some point that ball is going to stop bouncing but that degree is going to last forever. And I think in the classroom, a lot of times I used to have 4 simple rules: be on time, tell the truth, listen, respect everyone. If you do those 4 things in anything you do the rest of your life, you're going to be successful. If you're late to a class, well, you broke 2 rules. You didn't respect the professor and your classmates, and you were late. You weren't on time. And so I think those rules can kind of carry people through life if you just follow those 4 things. But there's nothing worse than, players have to miss a lot of class due to travel with what's going on with the game schedules, and we try to minimize that as much as possible. But they're going to miss class, so you don't want to be the person that walks into class late, sits in the back, acts like you're half asleep, and then has to miss 2 classes because you're traveling for a game. You want to be the one that's in the first 2 or 3 rows. You want to be the one that's engaged in the conversation. You want to be the one that goes and interacts with a professor to say, hey, by no control of my own, we have some games coming up where I'm missing class. What do I need to do in advance before I leave? I would see so many players that would, after the fact, say, all right, I missed that test. When can I make it up? Well, no, you should have thought about that before you left and created a time. And most of the professors are going to say, well, just take it when you get back or whatever. But to be proactive in the classroom is so important, and to realize that the professors are there to help you, not hurt you, but it's up to you to help yourself. And that's show up to class on time, 5 minutes early, and be in the first 2 or 3 rows, be engaged in the conversation, and interact with those professors. Make an occasional trip to go see a professor during their office hours. Doesn't mean you have to go all the time, but occasionally you pop in and just say, hey, I've got a game coming up on Thursday. We're leaving on Wednesday. I know I'm going to miss a lecture on Wednesday. I'm going to get a copy of the notes from whoever in the class, but is there anything I need to know ahead of time? I think professors will appreciate that, and that'll pay huge dividends down the road. But at the end of the day, and again, I know it's different nowadays in the world we're in, because sports at the Division I level, it's a business, but it's a business where you can get your degree at the same time. And I know a lot of people that are working in the business world that are going to school on top of that so they can get their degree. You're doing the exact same thing now, but you're 18 to 22 years old doing it. So you don't want to look back at age 35, 40, 45 and say, if I would have only gotten that degree.
Wow. Now, right there, that's a whole nother talk show, Coach Tungate. That's beautiful. And you every time I hear you speak, you're sharing so many truth bombs that it's ricocheting and causing me to have even more questions that I want to ask you, but we'll save those for the next show.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you, in terms of the issue of prospective athletes who don't really value the importance of visiting a campus to really get a feel for the campus life, the team culture, the facilities. How important and critical do you think it's important for the athletes to visit these college campuses, even if it's, long distance?
I think it's extremely important, and one of the most difficult times of recruiting was during COVID, when people couldn't visit campuses. And you took a chance on a player took a chance on the program. And I think that's where really see a lot of transfers happening during that time period, because people didn't visit the campus. It's when it comes to picking a college, you need to talk to those players and you need to find out what it's like. You need to find out what's a typical day. What do you like? What do you don't like? What is it with the teammates? What is it with the culture? What's the culture of the athletic department? What's the culture of the school? How's the administration at the school? How's the athletic training staff? What's the strength coach like? I mean, those are things that you could only experience by being there. And those are the only feel that you can get. It's one thing, like I can talk, let's say I'm recruiting you and we can talk and I can tell you things that you really like and that you're going to want to hear and things like that. But at the end of the day, you need to get a feel for what it's really like. You need to go watch a practice. You need to go, I'll never forget, we had a practice one time, and during that practice, I really went after a player, got on a player really hard, and really, disciplined. And we had a recruit in the stands. And I'll never forget, after that practice, the recruit came up and said, I love the fact that you were like that, because that was real. And that's exactly what I'm looking for when sorry, we got someone outside the door here that's making a lot of noise here at my office.
We have some enthusiasm for this show.
I was going to say, yeah, I don't know who's out there right now, but somebody's out there. Apologize for that. I don't know who that is.
That's okay.
But anyway,
this is real life. This
yeah,
is real life.
exactly.
We don't exist in some kind of vacuum and some little bubble. This is real life here. So that's quite all right.
These are the speed bumps we move through. But no, and that recruit appreciated the fact it was real, because they would go to some practices and it'd be fake. They would do stuff and everybody would wave to the recruit and stuff like that. I'm like, this is who we are, because when you come here, we're not all going to wave to you. Like, this is how we practice. This is what we do. And the only way you can experience that is by being on campus. And, I can tell you about our food services. I can tell you about what's going on in the cafeteria, but you need to see it. You need to eat it for yourself to see what it's like. I can tell you about our housing. I can tell you about dorms and apartments and things like that. But until you experience it, you have no idea, and for you in real estate, you can tell someone about a house, but until they see it, they can't make that their own. And so being there in person on a campus visit, I think, is really, really important.
Wow. More questions are coming, Coach Tungate. I love talking to you.
We're on to part 3 now.
Man, I'm telling you, we have an infinitesimal amount of segments that we could add to this. And, I don't want to get off track, so let's stick with what we're here for. And we're discussing 10 mistakes that we want our student athletes to avoid making. And another one would be the misuse and abuse of social media. Now, social media is very important, and it's a great marketing tool for any business. I'm in real estate, and we use it all the time. But in sports, it's incredibly advantageous for the franchise owners in the professional sports, as well as even at the college level, and for now with these athletes getting the NIL opportunities to market themselves, to get their message out there, get the brand out there. But there are some areas that they need to look out for. Can maybe you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a company that I used to have our players go down and visit, and really large company, employs tens of thousands of people. And what they said was that anyone that applies for a job, they look at the previous 5 years of social media posts to see if it's the type of person they want to hire. And so I always tell our players, as an incoming freshman, I hope you did well your senior year, because you're already, when you graduate, you got years 2, 3, 4, and 5 right here on our campus. So you better trend in the right way. If you made any mistakes, you're in year 1, that they would be looking your senior year in high school. And so people don't realize that employers see what's there. As a college coach, I would look at people's social media, and there are people that I did not recruit because of what they put on their social media.
Wow.
What scares me is if they're putting things on social media and their parents still see it, well, that says a lot about what's happening in the home too. Because there's things that, as a parent, get that off now, and if that's not being taught, then by the time we get them, who knows what's going to happen. So there are people that I have not recruited because of what's on their social media page. And I know for a fact there are companies that have not hired people because of what's on their social media page. So social media can be a great tool. It can really tell your story. It can promote things, but it's also a very dangerous thing, especially, I heard someone speak yesterday, and they said that all it takes is 10 words and I think it was six pictures, and they can create a deep fake on somebody. 10 words, 6 pictures, and that's what can be created to have a deep fake out there, and which has caused all kinds of problems for people. And so imagine the stuff you're posting, what that could open up to a whole nother level of things that could cause harm for you. And that's why I think you want to tell your story, and I think social media can be used to tell your story, but I don't really care what someone does at 11 o'clock at night, while they're walking down the street. Like, it doesn't do anything for me. But you go on a family vacation or you're hanging out with your teammates, that's a great story. I'd love to see that. But it's tough, and I think kids today are in a tough spot because social media is, the stuff people say about each other is just amazing to me. And the stuff that don't have any idea what's going on, they just say whatever just to get a like or a hit or a whatever, a following. It just amazes me that what people are willing to do, the depths they're willing to go to bring someone down for their own satisfaction or whatever word I'm looking
A
for. But
promotion benefit.
yeah,
But you're
yeah.
exactly
So,
right. It's normalized
mhm.
in our culture, and we see it at every level of education. But it's especially prevalent with the cyberbullying movement. The children get on these video games in the K-12 sector, and then they might be on Fortnite over the weekend, and then by the time Monday morning comes, they're bringing it to the school, and now you have this vitriol that has been boiling over, and they're lashing out at each other, and it's out of control.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. Now let's look at what you touched on earlier in terms of navigating the NIL landscape, the name, image, likeness. For those of you out there that have never heard this term, but most people in sports are very, very familiar with this by now. And I can't imagine that anyone will skip their due diligence and seek professional support, legal counsel, and rush into any type of agreement, whether it's verbal or written. But this has happened. And maybe you can give us a little bit of some clues on what athletes need to be looking out for if they're being enticed with a lucrative NIL opportunity.
Well, now everybody has an agent, and again, it's become a pro model. Everyone has an agent starting in high school, or whether they're transferring, they'll hire an agent to kind of do some behind the scenes, see what they can get paid, what they can make, and things like that. And so I think the first thing it starts with, and again, I'm talking about the Division I level where you're making a decent amount of money. You got to hire the right agent. You got to get an agent that cares about you and not their pocket. And I think there's so many things right now with NIL. There's so many people that surround these athletes that are trying to get a piece of the pie. They want a part of that money. They want, how can I use this player to help me get what I need, as opposed to how can I help this player get what they want.
Wow.
And I think that's a huge thing that's going on right now, to where players are surrounding themselves with the wrong people. Everyone's trying to cash in on that player. And I think it's one thing if, let's say as a family member, like for me, if my kids were going to get an NIL deal, I don't want that. They've earned that. That's for them. Now, maybe as a family, you run into a rough time. Maybe there's a loss of a job or a family emergency where, they can help out and things like that. But I think there's so many people that are trying to use these kids to pay for them because they don't want to work. They're not doing it's not to help in an emergency or a financial crisis or situation. It's because I want to stay home so my kid can support me. That's where I have a real problem with what's going on with the NIL. And so I think surrounding yourself with the right people is so important, where not everybody's trying to take what you've rightfully earned through your hard work, your blood, sweat, and tears. Now, families that have taken you to places and thing obviously deserve to be a part of that. But I just think that it needs to be a small circle of people that are making those decisions. And I think that, you got to have the right people looking over that NIL contract. That's why you have to have the right agent that knows what they're doing, that has your best interests at heart, to make sure you're getting the best deal and that you're protected.
Wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that insight. Now we're going to move into a different direction. I think we've covered enough of the implications of, making decisions about your future as a student athlete at the collegiate level. Let's talk about your vision for the future of basketball. Where do you see college basketball heading in 5 years, especially regarding NIL, the transfer portal, recruiting, and team culture? Is balance possible, or is the game fundamentally evolving?
Well, I think at some point people will figure it out. I think as a Division One player, players should be under contract. I think that makes it a lot easier where there's a system in place, and how there's people a lot smarter than me that can figure all that stuff out. But I think players have to be under contract to where it puts some guardrails in, it protects them, and makes them employees of the university. And I know, now, do they get benefits? Do they get, I know there's a lot of things to that, but I think by making them under contract as an employee of the university, I think that will eliminate a lot of those problems to where, maybe coming out, you sign a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract. Ideally, you sign a 4-year contract with a stipulation that if you have the opportunity to go pro or get drafted, and I think if they could make it to where if you could get a contract that maybe allows for a one-time transfer. So if the situation's not right, and I do think if a coach leaves, the player should be able to leave at any time. So if you're granted one-time transfer, your second school, that coach leaves, well, I think that player should have the opportunity to go too, in that situation. So there's some things I think you can work out under a contract, under an employee type of thing, to where, as an employee, you got to give a 2 weeks notice. Well, what's that look like for a college athlete? You can't just all of a sudden walk into a coach one day and say, I'm leaving. Maybe there's a time frame there. Again, there's people a lot smarter than me that can handle that, but I think that's where I see it headed. And I think that'll bring some normalcy to where it's treated more like the pro game and more of the pro model, to where you kind of have. I think what's really hard right now is like for alums. If you're an alumni and a fan in that fan base, it's hard to get attached to a player because they're gone. You got a whole new roster the next year, and you start getting excited about that roster. Well, the next year you got a whole new roster you got to learn, and I think that's really difficult. And keep in mind, like name, image, and likeness when it started was for use of their name, image, and likeness. And now it's gone this whole direction to where now you're paying to play, paying to go to school, and it's just gone a whole nother direction with what's going on. So I do see employees of schools under contract coming, and I think that'll help normalize it a little bit.
Coach Tungate, as you were speaking there, I really get the sense that Tim Buckley and the other professionals over there at the NCAA administrative offices need your expertise as they compose and strategically plan a new trajectory for this whole NIL debacle that we are now finding ourselves embroiled in around the country. And so
I don't think they need me. I think they need a Jay Billis. I think they need a Tom Izzo. I think they need people that are those type of people to come to a room with their suggestions. And I think that would really make a big difference by getting the right people in the room.
Yes. Well, and I respect your expertise, but I would not underestimate your contributions based on the many decades of expertise that you have offered in that sector. And so that would be very, very impactful and beneficial. In fact, I would even say, do you offer personal coaching or training for coaches, for players who are looking to level up on their game, and maybe as a consultant to those who are looking to make it to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, from a consulting standpoint, I'd be happy to help anyone I could. I'm not physically capable of doing the training and things anymore, to where I can get on the court with somebody and help them with things like that. But, from just an advice, guidance, opinion, consulting, whatever, I'm obviously more than happy to help. Whether it's an athlete, a business, whatever, I'm here to help in any way I possibly can.
Wonderful. Okay, now we're going to move to segment 2, and we'll take a little 30-second pause. And then I just have a few little questions here, these 7 questions, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
I'll take another sip of my Sprite. I don't usually drink Sprite or pop. I usually drink water like you, but when I come to the office, they have free Sprite in the refrigerator. And every now and then, my taste buds will be screaming for one of these. And today was one of those instances.
Okay. All right. Well, then drink your Sprite.
Yes. And especially because before we started our segment, I was having all those technical issues.
Mhm.
So the Sprite really helped me to gather myself and maintain my composure.
There you go. To help you refocus. So
Yes.
like you should be a commercial for Sprite.
Well, it does match this color scheme here.
There you go. I think I see an ad coming right here.
Well, if they want to give me a NIL deal, hey, we can do it.
There you
NIL
go.
deal for realtors, anybody?
There you go. The Sprite podcast.
Let me do this. If you like to drink something sweet that will level up your game and enhance your mood, why don't you try a Sprite? The most refreshing beverage. If you're having technical issues,
I'd give you a contract right now.
oh man, let me let you go, Coach Tungate. You know I can sit here and play. You don't have time for games. Okay, segment 2. Let's regain our composure. All right, we're talking with Coach Tungate here, one of the most renowned coaches of basketball at the collegiate level, NCAA Division I. Now let's go on a more personal level as we deep dive in here with Coach Tungate. Can you please tell us what led you to coach women's basketball?
You know, when I was in college, I was playing baseball at Oakland. And in those days, girls basketball was in the fall. And so that's what they used to do in Michigan. They would play girls basketball in the fall. And so it allowed my schedule where I could help out. When I went to Clarkston High School, and I knew Larry Marley real well. He was one of my teachers when I was in school. He asked me to come help him with the girls program at Clarkston. And so I really enjoyed my time helping him out while I was playing baseball in college. And then it allowed my first job was with Ann Sarah. Her dad, Al Sarah, owns all the Sarah car dealerships. And so Ann asked me to come. She got the job at Oakland Community College, asked me to be her assistant at Oakland Community College. So my first start was in women's basketball. And then got on the men's side and did that for a while. And then when the opportunity presented itself at Oakland, our athletic director at the time, Tracy Huth, asked me if I would be interested in taking over the women's program. And that was an easy decision. I was a head coach at a Division II school in Tennessee. I was ready to be a head coach again. You know, I knew Coach Campy was going to be at Oakland for a long, long time to come. And I was ready to be a head coach. And I love my alma mater. I love Oakland. I loved everything about Oakland, and I wanted to be able to give back to my alma mater and to have an opportunity to be a head coach. When I was a student at Oakland, I would go to all the women's games and loved I knew those teams, and it was fun to watch. And I saw myself at that time. I said, someday I want to be the head women's basketball coach at Oakland. And when that opportunity came, I jumped at it, and it was a great experience and a great opportunity. And I'm forever grateful for Tracy Huth hiring me. And it was a great move on my part.
So what was so special about women's basketball as opposed to men's basketball? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, because I've been wondering it myself.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I think they truly care about each other. I think that's a big part of the game, is that there's a true care about each other. I think they really, the women that I was able to coach, and I was so blessed to coach, they didn't necessarily care about who got the credit. They just wanted each other, because what I found was, like, if one player is having a bad day, that affected everybody because they cared so much about each other. And I think the other part of it too is, their degree is important to them. They a lot of them now, especially with the way the game is growing now, want to pursue professional basketball, but they also understand how important that degree is. So I enjoyed that, the things I got to focus on was more coaching the game of basketball. And it was more relationship driven amongst the team. And so I think ego is probably the best thing that where the difference is between the two.
Wow. Now this is really an interesting and insightful perspective on that question. And I thank you very much for sharing that, Coach Tungate. I think that this is very, very helpful to individuals who are interested in becoming college coaches in the basketball realm, because it would help them to see what they might be getting themselves into, and maybe perhaps they will reassess their motives, and if they want to be dealing with that ego issue on the male basketball side, as it were.
Well, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. And so as a coach, you had to really try to bring together that team collectively to where how can we take that ego for the good of the team? Like, what can we do that, when you bring what you want to bring to the table, how do we make that for what's best for the team?
Sure.
I think on the women's side, it's just, I always had so much respect for how much they truly care about each other.
Yes.
And I just thought that was it was fun to watch, and just the coachability and what it took and things, that just the approach to the game. And again, don't get me wrong, like there's, the best players in the women's game have an ego. You can't be successful without one. But it's just different in how they go about it. And,
Sure.
and again, I loved every second of the time I got to spend coaching the women at Oakland University.
Yes, absolutely. Now, in those 30 years of coaching, 30 plus, I think 31 years to be precise, I'm sure you must have shared some very good laughs and some funny moments with your coaches and players. Can you recall a funny story that you've had as a coach in the women's basketball realm at the college level?
Yeah, I've had several. Probably one of the best ones that personally, I was coaching at Lincoln Memorial University in Tennessee. Was the head coach. We were having a practice where I was really getting after the players, and I mean, like, really getting on them, putting them on the line, making them run, getting after them, coaching them pretty hard. And my assistant came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're never going to get them go this hard if you don't take that dryer sheet that's stuck to your butt." No, if I had a dryer sheet stuck to the butt of my pants and I was wondering why they weren't going harder. It made me mad, and they kind of a little smirk on their face, and I was getting mad. Well, it's because I was walking around with a dryer sheet stuck to me. So that's one that comes to mind that happened. There's been quite a few over the years of the moments that have definitely brought laughs. I'm sure a lot of the players, when they get together, are telling those stories now. And they'd probably be ones that could tell you better than me, because I've had so many of them. I think I've forgotten them. But
yeah, you could write a book.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of interesting. I'll never forget. I went to a high school game one time recruiting, so on the men's side, and watched a player that I didn't think was good enough. And so at halftime I left because I had to get to another game. Well, the next day I got the nastiest email from the mom of the kid because I left at halftime, telling me that, he got all upset that I left at halftime and affected the way he played in the second half. It was all my fault and everything else that whole second half. And I felt I had left at halftime because he wasn't good enough and I had to get to another game. I made time to go to that first half, but I've got plenty of stories like that I've dealt with over the years. But yeah, no, it was a great 31 years, a lot of fun and a lot of funny stories along the way. I'll keep most of them to myself, though.
I can understand why. Now, what advice can you offer coaches who want to coach women or men's basketball at the college level?
I think the biggest thing is you got to go watch practice. I think one of the things, the best way to connect with a coach, every coach loves talking basketball, especially in today's environment. Coaches spend the majority of their time recruiting, raising money. So whenever they have an opportunity to talk basketball, coaches love that opportunity. So go watch a practice. There's plenty of programs around with every area you're at. Find those programs and go watch them, because those are the people whose assistants are then going to get head coaching jobs somewhere. They're going to need people to take with them. And if you've been showing up to their practices and getting the chance to know them and following up with a note, "Thanks for letting me watch practice," and just, not being obnoxious about it, but enough to where they know how interested and serious you are about it, that's going to go a long ways in having the opportunity to get a job. and just go watch practices. And I think that's one thing that's really missing today with coaches is it's so easy to find anything you want on coaching on YouTube. And you can go, if you want to know how to defend the pick and roll, just Google or AI now, whatever, defend pick and roll, and you'll get 55 examples that you can watch. And so a lot of people don't go to coaching clinics because they can get it online. But the thing with coaching is the relationships you build. And the thing that's going to get you jobs is those relationships. And you don't build those relationships by sharing internet stories. And so I was I went and watched a camp a couple of days ago that a good friend of mine, Tim McCormick, runs for the state of Michigan, played in the NBA, and runs a camp that had 160 kids out there that were coached by some of the best area coaches. And I walked in, and some of these people I haven't seen in 15 years. And the connection we had, shared a hug, a laugh, a story about, and things as if we were together yesterday. And I hadn't seen some of these people in 15 years.
Yes.
But it's those relationships we built by going to clinics, staying up night, drawing up X and O stuff on napkins and going out to eat. Like those are the things that are going to get you jobs by building those relationships. And I think coaches now, it's so easy to find information you need online, but that doesn't have anything to do with getting a job. It's the relationships that are going to get you the jobs. So you've got to be at the things and be at the clinics and be at the practices to build those real genuine relationships with people that when they get a job, they're going to remember you and want to take you with them.
Very well said, Coach Tungate. Now, how can athletes avoid burnout before college?
I'm not a believer in that.
Really? Okay.
I think that if you truly love the sport, I don't think the sport is what's going to burn you out. I think it's everything around you that could burn you out. I think it's you play a game and you get in the car and one of your parents is telling you the 55 things you should have done better. If you complete a game and you get in the car, you drive home, and your parent who's not your coach wants to plug in a video from the game that they filmed on the sideline with their camera to show you the 55 things you did wrong, that can burn you out. I think as a parent, the more the parent can say, I enjoyed watching you play, as opposed to coaching you, you're not going to burn out because you love the sport. That's why you do what you do. And the minute you take away that game from somebody, that's when burnout hits. So I don't think the sport causes burnout. I think kids love to play. They love to compete. They play 3 games a day in AU and stuff. Okay, that's great. Get your training in, do what you got to do. But I think the burnout comes from what's going on around them. I think the burnout comes from a disconnected locker room. I think the burnout comes from, a family member that's going to tell them everything they need to know. I think, and this, I'm really passionate about this part of it. In 31 years, I've been very fortunate to have won, but I've been very fortunate to have lost, and I've been very fortunate to have been average. And the thing that I learned in all that, especially now that I've retired and had a chance to really reflect, the teams that win trust their coaches and they trust their teammates. Teams that are average trust one of the two. They either trust the coaches but not their teammates, or they don't trust their coaches but trust their teammates. And teams that lose don't trust either one. And so I think as a parent, it's your job to help your child trust their coaches and trust their teammates. And I've heard so many stories of parents that, hey, I'll give you $20 if you score more points than that person. Well, you're not building trust amongst the teammates, and you're surely not supporting the coach. And that's where after a game, when the game's done, you're not your child's coach. Doesn't mean you're not going to help them. Doesn't mean you're not going to give advice. But after the game's not the time to do it. Get them in the car. I love watching you play today. I had so much fun. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to see the next game. Then maybe the next day you say, hey, you want to go out in the driveway and get some shots or work on some things? Hey, I was, whatever, but you're not the coach. And so I think the burnout comes from the people that surround that athlete, not the sport itself.
Wow. You see me over here writing notes, and
you can author the book.
Well, I'm just going to say you might have to hire me to help you brand some of these wonderful business ideas that you are sharing with the audience, because the folks that are listening, they're going to get so much information from you right here that they will be able to take it. And even these very athletes that we're talking about, if they just listen to what you are saying, they can tap into many opportunities, and it will just be amazing. Like, for example, you're talking about, coaching parents and teaching parents how to support the coach and to support the program. You see, how to build that sense of collegiality among your parents that will enhance the culture of the team and the locker room and so forth. So that's very.
Let me tell you a quick thing on that, because I think this is important. When I was in high school, my dad was the athletic director at Clarkson. I played for Coach Fife. Coach Fife was an unbelievable coach, Hall of Fame coach, one of the best coaches to ever do it. In my junior year, Coach Fife was all over me. He was demanding, high standards, high expectations, and he wasn't going to lower his standards for anybody. And so one day he was really after me in practice. And so I went home mad. And so I told my dad, because he's the athletic director, I said, Dad, you got to do something about Coach Fife. He's out of control. And my dad said, well, you know what? He said, I think there's two things we could do. And so I'm thinking, suspend or fire, because you're my dad and you're the athletic director, and I'm mad at him right now. And he said, number one, he said, you can either quit, or number two, you can shut up. He said, I don't care which one it is, but tomorrow morning when I take you to school, you're going to do one of those two things. You just let me know which one, or you got your one of those two. You got your choice. And I thought, this didn't go the way I thought it was supposed to go. So the next morning, woke up, drive to school thinking, he'll have forgotten about it. So he puts the car in park and he goes, well, what's it going to be? And I said, what do you mean? He said, are you going to quit? I said, Dad, I can't quit. He said, good, shut up. Better not hear another word about it. Have a good practice today. How many parents would do that today? And that's where in today's world, that's not how parents act. And that's why their kids are not set up for success. I wouldn't have been able to have the career I had if it wasn't for my dad and the lessons he taught me. That, hey, that's your coach. You're going to listen. You're going to do what he says because I trust him. And so the trust your coach and your teammates started at home. My dad's like, you're going to trust him because I do. And you're going to shut up and you're going to play. And I think if more parents would do that, their kids would have so much more success, as opposed to now they get mad at this. Their kid gets mad at the coach. Well, it must be the coach. So I'm not going to have my kid talk to the coach. I'm going to talk to the coach. And if I don't like the answer, then I'm going to go to the AD. And if I don't like the answer, I'm going to go to the principal. And if I don't like the answer, I'm going to the school board. And that's a whole another segment we can do about how the administrations don't support the coaches because they're afraid of parents. At some point, someone's got to make a stand and say, that's our coach. We trust our coach. If you want to win, because you got to trust the coach and trust your teammates.
And the same is very true and apropos in the classroom situation where we have a epidemic in our classrooms nationwide where the child can do no wrong. The child doesn't have to surrender their cell phone to the teacher because the teacher doesn't pay the cell phone bill. You see, the child can sit in the classroom and do no work, eat chips or whatever the case may be, and the parent wants to come in and yell at the dean or yell at the teacher, what have you. So it's the same dynamic. And so I think it's great that now we can play this podcast to all the parents and we can blast them with the truth. Now let's look at one of our final questions here. We're talking about advice that today's college basketball players need as they approach playing at the college level in anticipation of playing at the elite professional level, whether it's here in the NBA, the WNBA, or overseas. What kind of advice would you are a seasoned coach, you know talent, you recognize it instantly, you can judge a person probably even if they don't have a ball in their hands and see if they know how to play. And what kind of advice would you offer today's college players? Okay.
So the biggest advice I would give them is don't give a reason for a person not to take you. For example, during a game, ref makes a bad call. What's your body language like? Because at the next level, they're looking for reasons not to take you. Don't give them one. Every box that they check, you want to be a positive, because when you get I was able to coach as an assistant coach a player that got drafted in the NBA. Every NBA scout called me as an assistant coach, called teachers, went back to their high school. They're investing lots of money. They're going to do their homework. Don't give them a reason not to take you. And so if a scout watches a game, if a scout calls a coach, is that player coachable? How hard do they work? Are they the hardest working player on the team? Where do they finish in the sprints? How are they in the weight room? What are they like in the classroom? Do they show up on time? Because now there's exceptions. The top 10 people in the draft, obviously character is important and things like that, but there's going to be some wiggle room there because they're just really good. But we're talking about the people that just want the opportunity to play professional basketball. Don't give them an opportunity to say no to you. Let your game be the reason you don't get to that next level, not the other things. I think that's the best advice I can give.
You heard it, folks, right here. Premier Insights Podcast, truth bomb after truth bomb from the legendary luminary of coaching women's and men's basketball, the NCAA Division I level coach, Jeff Tungate. I want to congratulate you on taking on your new role of Director of Development and Campaign Fundraising at Rochester Christian University. Transitioning from coaching to fundraising and institutional advancement marks a significant shift. And I want to ask you before we go, how are you applying your experience in building team culture, leadership, and motivation from the court to engaging donors, crafting campaign strategies, and advancing Rochester Christian University's mission off the court?
Well, the biggest thing is the last few years, the way the landscape's changed, I was a fundraiser in coaching, and now the only difference is I get to fundraise, but at night, I'm not worried about, I get to turn off my phone. I don't worry about anyone calling me. I don't worry about thinking about the game plan, the next game, the next scouting report. And so I can take those skills that I was able to learn as a fundraiser and now apply them to here, just in a different way where, the things that I'm doing the same is, in when you're coaching in college, you have a place that a player comes that you want to take them to. Where here we have students that come to a place we want to take them to, and I can help create the resources that can get them to where they want to go. It's very similar. I want to get people where they want to go on and off the court basketball wise when I was coaching. Now I want to get the students that are at Rochester Christian University to a place they want to go by the resources we're going to be able to provide them through the money that we're raising. So there's a lot of similarities. We're going to eventually launch a campaign, and to launch that campaign, that's our game. And we got to have a game plan going in. We got to have a scouting report. We got to know, who we're going to, instead of who we're going to play against, who we're going to target for this, how are we going to get there, after we start getting going, how are we going to keep the momentum going after a win. How do you make sure you get the next win and stay consistent? So there's a lot of similarities between the two. But at the end of the day, whether you're in coaching or whether you're in fundraising, it's all about relationships.
Speaking of relationships, I had the opportunity to witness you and Coach Campy in action during a time I was a graduate student at Oakland University, go Grizzlies, and I had the opportunity to be a part of a wonderful charity golf outing over there at, I think it was in Shelby Township. We ran into each other.
Cherry Creek.
Yeah, Cherry Creek. And we were doing some important work for your university. And I was there with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and Mr. Tim Morton, who is a wonderful, wonderful asset in the world of sports and ministry. And I wanted to ask you a question in terms of anticipating institutional growth, because I know at RCU you have a new president, and I had a chance to meet him at the golf outing. I believe his name is President Regis Wanyika.
Yep.
Okay, did I say his name correctly?
You did.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to say his name before I did.
I wanted to see you do it first.
So as RCU continues its leadership transition, with President Regis Wanyika stepping in this summer at RCU, how are you positioning development campaigns to complement this institutional shift under his leadership? And how do you see your role evolving in support of university-wide momentum?
Well, he's got a ton of energy. I mean, he's a go-getter. He's already proven what he can done at other schools. I think he had the comment at one point that he's a guy that runs to the fire instead of from the fire.
Yes.
And so he's not afraid of getting involved and rolling up his sleeves and doing what it takes to get done. But the most important thing is the reasons why he does it. He does it so we have the opportunity to bring people to our campus and make a complete difference in their life. And so that energy that he has is contagious, and I told him that the other day that, when he's in a room, there's an excitement there. And you got a chance to see it at the golf outing.
Yes.
You can tell that his faith and his belief and what he stands for. And so why he does things is so important that, he does it to bring people to Rochester Christian University so we can equip them with the tools that they need to go make it in the real world and be people that are a faith-based institution. And so, I think, we're just going to follow his lead. He's very open to ideas, which I really like and I really respect. And I've had a chance to make some trips to meet with some potential donors and different things with him. And just his eagerness and energy, I think, is going to be seen throughout the campus. And I think the way the campus looks now compared to where it's going to be in 2 and 3 years, I think you're going to see a drastic difference in what we have here. The people here are fantastic. They've always been fantastic. We got a great faculty, great staff, people that truly care. But just some of the things that he wants to get done from a physical standpoint on this campus, I think you're going to see a lot of changes here in the upcoming months.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you this about him. Is the President Winika a basketball player?
He loves sports.
Wow.
He loves sports. Athletics is a really important part of who he is. I know we're teaching him how to become a Detroit Lions fan. And so, he's very passionate about sports. So basketball, football, he loves athletics. And so for me personally, that was an important thing because I think sports is a great avenue to reach people. I think people enjoy watching sport. I think you come together at a sporting event, and knowing that he loves sports was a big part of why I wanted to be here.
Absolutely. And I think that you two have a combined energy that is unparalleled and should provide to be a very fruitful relationship, very fruitful and beneficial to Rochester Christian University. Coach Tungate, I want to thank you for sharing your story, your passion, and your dedication with us today. Your journey from your days as a standout student athlete to a transformative leader of Oakland women's basketball is truly inspiring. You've built not just wins, but character, resilience, and pride, leaving an indelible mark on the program and the lives you've touched. To our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in and celebrating with us. Your support, not just for today's show, but for the Golden Warriors community, matters more than words can say. Coach Tungate, we wish you continued strength and peace on your next chapter. And to everyone listening, thanks again. Keep lifting up those around you, just as Coach Tungate has done so consistently. Go Warriors. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell so you never miss an episode featuring our incredible luminaries. If you're thinking about buying or selling a home right here in Michigan, I'd love to help. Call me at 248-672-4505. My team and I specialize in providing a first-class, luxury, white glove real estate experience for high net worth families, investors, pro athletes, or anyone relocating near or far. Whether you're buying, renting, or selling, we're more than just real estate. We deliver discretion, convenience, and ease. And we're here to make your next move your best one. Dial or text 248-672-4505 and mention Premier Insights Podcast at Raphael Levon Price Real Estate for your special offer. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, take care, and here's to living luxuriously and seamlessly.